Hello, it's Douglas Kennedy. I'm here in my apartment in Paris and delighted to be talking to my Korean readers from far away in France on a cold, wet October day, a few days before the American election, which has me profoundly worried for obvious reasons. Anyway, I have your questions here and I'm very excited to be answering them and thought they were really excellent. The first question was, can you accept children for what they are? Well, I hope you can. In fact, I think speaking as a parent, and my son Max at 32 is a photographer, my daughter Amelia at 28 is a young playwright in New York. They're both artists, and very much I accept them for what they are. I think one of the great tragedies in life is when parents don't accept children for what they are, when they want to turn them into something that is usually an image of them. That is always a recipe for catastrophe. I found, having grown up in a very difficult household, that with my own children, my love for them is unconditional. Of course, there are always bumpy moments in all relationships. But yes, you have to accept children and other people for what they are. And I think here's a very important point as well. After a certain age, I was about to speak in French, after a certain age, you should never try to change anybody. In fact, you should never try to change your children. But people, certainly in adult life, who think, oh, I got together with him, I knew it was a problem, but I thought I could change him. I've heard this from a lot of my women friends. That is always a recipe for disaster. Don't accept anything except for what the person is. Next question. A reader asked, is it necessary to bring up her story in dealing with men? And is there a person out there who accepts others for whom they are? I have no idea. I think one of the great truths of life is when you meet somebody, and if you're dancing around thinking about getting involved, one of the things you have to do is accept the person for what they are. As I said in the previous response, if you try to change somebody or think you can change somebody, it's a disaster. And here's another point, very important. If someone tries to change you, walk out the door. That will never happen. I had a girlfriend after my first divorce who was all over me at the time, very in love, wanted a baby. I was very kind of cautious about that. And she kept saying, I love the way you live. And after 3 or 4 months, she started saying, you're out every night at jazz clubs, at cinemas, at restaurants, well, rarely restaurants, but classical concerts. With me, I like being indoors. I like sitting in front of a fire with a book, and you're going to have to do that. And I turned to her and said, go find yourself an accountant, and walked away. She ended up with a notary republic. My point is, if someone can't accept you for what they are, leave. What is your life philosophy? What do you think is the most important thing in life, and how does it affect your works? I don't know if I have a life philosophy. What I do have is a point of view of how to live your life and to accept the fact that in a life there will be good things, there will be bad things, there will be things in between, gray. And there will be times when you are very disappointed, especially by yourself. And everyone has a degree of disappointment in life. I think the important thing is, can you have an interesting life? That's key. And if you can have an interesting life, and if you can keep it interesting, and if you can remain curious, that is essential. Me, after I finish this video, I'm going to go to an afternoon movie here in Paris, a forgotten film noir of the late 1950s. I'll write in between. I'll go to the gym. I'll write tonight. I'm seeing friends for dinner tonight. Tomorrow night I'm in Berlin. I will be at a movie in the afternoon and a jazz gig, and I'll write in between. That's how I keep things interesting. I have a lot of cultural activity, and I'm curious about everything. I'm someone who reads 4 or 5 newspapers every day, and also I write a column here in France on politics, on American politics, which are very complicated right now. And so clearly I have to remain abreast of what is going on in the world. And I think curiosity is for me the biggest philosophy of life. Remain curious, remain interested, remain interesting. How do you find you can balance and speed? In other words, can I find an equilibrium in my life along with doing a lot? I think I have. My equilibrium is writing. Every day I write a minimum of 2 pages of my manuscript. It's not a huge amount, but it's enough to move things forward. As the novel advances, I tend to write more pages. I also tend to accept in life that I think, like everyone, I have fears, I have anxieties, I have neuroses. Show somebody who hasn't neuroses and I'll show you a liar. Everyone is anxious on a certain level. That's life, and I think you need to accept that. Just as you need to accept there are nights when you might not sleep very well. I had one last night. I got up at 2 a.m. and I wrote 200 words of my new book and then finally went back to bed. I take every day as it comes, and I try to make it an interesting day. That's probably subconscious. And also I try to achieve something every day. So writing for me is part of that. I'm also someone with always a big to-do list. I was born on January 1st, so my friends who like astrology say I'm very Capricorn, very organized, very disciplined, very responsible, ambitious. I like being organized. My apartments are very organized because life is chaotic. And if you can be organized within and around you as well, that somehow diminishes the chaos of life. Okay. Someone asked, should I follow my parents' wishes and do what they want me to do in my life? My response to that is absolutely not. Avoid that, avoid that. I had a father who was from the lower middle class, was born in a very tough Irish Catholic part of New York, had a very authoritarian father who was a captain in the Marines. That was my grandfather, so I was born into a military family. My father basically realizing that I was arty early on, he kept pushing me to go to law school, to become a businessman, to be like him. I think my father hated his life. And he couldn't stand the idea that I might have a life more interesting than he did. I ran away from home when I was 23. I mean, I was an adult, but I walked away. Excuse me, I was 22. I took a plane to Dublin and lived a bohemian existence, ran a theater company, which I started, eventually becoming the director of the Abbey Theatre's second theater. That's the National Theatre of Ireland, and that's when I was 23. I ran away from my father's insistence that I follow him into his life, a life that he didn't like. You live once, and trust me, it goes quickly. And if you don't do what you want with your life, you will always regret this. More tellingly, you can never please other people, especially your parents. And a parent who is pushing you into a life you don't want, that is a parent you have to sort of be careful around. I hate to be direct about that, but I grew up with this. It's also everywhere in my books. Never, never, never have a life imposed on you that you don't want. Live your life. And if you fail, you fail, and it's not the end of the world. And you probably won't fail, and you will go on to do something else. Keep it interesting. Don't listen to parents who want to push you into a corner from which there'll be very little escape. Why did I write Flyover, which is called Wonderful Land in Korea? Right now, in the United States, there are two Americas and we hate each other. And I was envisaging essentially a time in the near future when potentially the two coasts will withdraw from the rest of the country, and there will be a sort of cold civil war, and two states will be rubbing up next to each other. a Christian fundamentalist state, very, very libertarian, but also terribly conservative, where women's roles are homemakers and baby makers, and men work, and homosexuality is a punishable offense, and if you have an abortion, the abortionist is executed. That could very much well be coming, given the Christian fanatic tendencies of evangelists in America. And then basically another state, the two coasts, a couple of states in the north, a new republic, which has the veneer of progressivism, but where everyone is obliged to wear a chip in the side of their head, which operates like an iPhone. It sees all. In other words, there's no liberty. What was interesting about the novel when it was published in France was everyone said, this is very contemporary. And the fact that it's set in 2045, which is just 11 years from now, my math goes, in 2045, which is just 21 years from now, it doesn't put it that far off. Honestly, I'm making this video days before the American election, where it's beginning to look like Trump might win. I hope this is not going to happen. If this does happen, I think the divisions in the country could become very stark, and the country could begin to fracture. I'll tell you a funny story, interesting story. You probably remember the events of the 6th of January, 2021, when a group of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, essentially denying the election result and trying to stage what was basically a coup d'etat. And I had dinner some days afterwards. It was COVID, so we were sitting out on a terrace, heated, with big heaters, with snow swirling around. It was very strange. But my friend, he and I were at university together. He's a golden boy on Wall Street, super rich, but a very interesting man, and also a social progressive, if somewhat of a fiscal conservative. And he said to me, you know, he was shocked by what had happened, as I was. And he said, why are we subsidizing these idiots in the Midwest and the South, especially with their socially regressive ideas? Who controls money in the United States? It's the two coasts. California has the fourth biggest economy in the world. And at the same time, New York, it's the center of global finance. Why should we continue to give money to these people in the middle, especially when they are trying to regressively pull us back into a vision of life, which is very much kind of like the 1950s? Maybe we should divorce them. That was the click moment when I came up with the idea for Flyover. I hope it's a book that will keep you awake late at night and keep you thinking. And very much, and this is the next question, was the division of Korea in my mind when I was writing Flyover? Absolutely. Korea is probably the most divided country in the world. I've visited your brilliant country several times. I've been up to the DMZ. I've read a lot about North Korea and seen 2 or 3 films, including a fascinating documentary shot by a Russian in North Korea. I'm fascinated by totalitarian systems because they scare me so much, because I like my freedoms, my liberties, and because all totalitarian systems fundamentally are built on a lie. They're built on a cult of personality, and they have people in thrall to a system which is fascist. The only word for it is fascist. I can see this coming in the United States if the Christian fundamentalists have their way. Certainly, North Korea is the starkest example of this, especially next to a dynamic country like South Korea, with one of the biggest cultural footprints in the world, not to mention an enormous commercial footprint in the world. Divisions always fascinate me, and that's the next question. You know, are we by nature divided? That's a question I pose at the end of Flyover. I think so. I think everyone personally is divided. When I'm constructing a character, I often say to myself, what are the man's problems or the woman's problems? What are the neuroses? What are the pathologies? What are the disappointments? Everyone on one level or another is divided. Everyone. And to another extent, I think dividing ourselves is unfortunately part of the human experience, the human condition. Relationships fall apart, marriages fall apart, families fall apart, countries fall apart, businesses fall apart, and people go to war with each other frequently on a small domestic level or on an international level, because it's division, division, division. I think that is an essential tragedy in the human condition and one that we will never get around. And that brings me to the next question. What do I think of the marriage system? I've been married twice. The first time for 25 years, and 2 wonderful children came out of it. The second time, which was a love affair, and that lasted 5 years. Were either of the marriages a mistake? I'd say not. Was I unhappy in both of them at the end, and that's why I left? Yes. Do I think marriage is a good system? It's not something I'll ever do again, although I can say I'm with somebody now and I'm very happy. But she too is divorced, and neither of us want that. We don't need our names on a piece of paper saying we're married. Fundamentally, I think it's a very personal choice. Marriage is a contract. Happily, we've moved on from a period when you had to get married. It was essential. In fact, there was a time in the world where you weren't supposed to have sex before you were married. That was certainly the generation of my parents and before. I know very few very happy marriages, 1 or 2. Everyone who is married always talks about the fact that there are compromises to be made. There's the day in, the day out. I'll say this, my partner and I, she's a journalist, a very famous journalist on Le Monde here in France. She has her own apartment, I have mine, and we're together many days of the week. It's ideal because we're not living day in, day out with each other. I think that kills something. And I think if you live apart, but you're together, it maintains the mystery and the passion. And the last question, do you think the Generation Z, I'll do it in an English way, the Generation Z reading boom is a good thing, even if it's about being sexy and cool? I don't care if it's about being sexy and cool. I don't care if it's about trying to appear intelligent. The fact that people read, to me, that is crucial. The most dangerous thing in the world for me right now are screens. We all have to deal with them. I have an iPhone in front of me, which I'm recording this on. We all have to deal with them. We all spend a hell of a lot of time looking at them. As you can see in my apartment, this is part of my bibliothèque, as they would say in France. I have about 1,000 books here. I have 5,000 books back home in Maine, and probably about 1,000 books in London, where I have a pied-à-terre where my son lives, and probably about 500 books in Berlin. I'm a bookish guy. Please. This is what I do. I write books. But I also love to read, and I can't be without a book at any one time. So the fact that Generation Z is reading, I think that's fantastic. Anyone who opens a book, in my mind, is actually embarking on a journey, and is also saying, I'm not going to look at a screen. I'm going to travel with the writer. And because when you read, you travel. And also when you read, you discover something very important. You're not alone. All your problems, all the things you struggle with, all your doubts, all your insecurities, they've all been lived before. And I think we read to discover that we're not alone, and that also life is a very complex business. There's the good, there's the bad, there's the ugly. But as I said at the start of this little talk. Try to keep it interesting. And most of all, keep reading. Thank you so much. Bye.